Welcome to the acrylic demo for the workshop. So I'm just going to kind of show you what I like to do. Okay, so as far as the materials that I like to work with, I have my board, and I'll show you how I did that in just a second. Or to have a time lapse, but what I did is I just printed out the sketch that I wanted to use at the size that I wanted it to be. I put some pencil on the back, so it just kind of had a light charcoal layer. Then I used my ballpoint pen, placed it where I wanted to, traced over it, and that was how I transferred it to my panel. I'm working with a wood panel because I want to. You do not have to work with wood. You should probably be working with either a mixed media paper or a cold press illustration board. But if you do ever use wood, just a note, you really need to use matte medium to put a layer of that on so that your paint doesn't soak into the board. But that's not necessary if you're working with paper. Okay, so I also have, this is my paint palette for acrylic. I just really layer my paint on top of each other. I gave up cleaning it up a long time ago. These are my brushes. I have a few. This isn't a huge working area, so I'm going to choose kind of my smaller brushes. I will use a few of the larger ones, especially at first before I start going in. So these are kind of my favorites that I'm choosing. Then I'll put the rest away. Let me show you my paint box. It is full of paints. So again, one of my favorite colors is Windsor Blue. I know that I'm gonna be painting with greens, so I'm gonna choose, this is teal. I usually like to kind of choose a limited color palette. I might use a little bit of this. Okay, so I've chosen my color palette, which also I did already do a digital mock-up of my color palette, but I'm working with mainly greens, and actually this is kind of a primary color palette. I have my kind of greens and blues, reds, yellows, actually, yeah, sienna brown. And then I might mix them together to keep the colors harmonious. So I think with that, I'm ready to go. The colors that I really want to start with are going to be a little bit more general. So let me start with, this will be the skin color. This is my raw sienna. This is a, what is this color? Naphthol red. I think it's a little bit similar to a cad red. Yep, cad red. That's what I was thinking. And then, let's see, I'll go with this phthalo green. So some of these colors, if you haven't really worked with paint before, there's kind of these staple colors that you'll probably work with and become familiar with if you continue pursuing painting. Phthalo, cadmium, those are kind of terms, but They just refer to specific shades of colors, so it's something to keep in mind. And this is Windsor blue. My favorite is an indigo blue, but I think last time I went to the store they were out, so this will have to do. So we'll just kind of start with my basic colors. I don't want to put everything out on my palette because I don't want to waste anything. And with acrylic, it does dry and you cannot use it again. Like I said, like I can make this as wet as I want and it will not revive the color. And that's because acrylic is actually partially made out of plastic. So it does have a very plasticky consistency. Okay, this is enough to get going. I have my water cup. I have a paper towel, or you could use just a cloth, something to dab your wet paintbrush onto. So when you're painting, you might want to start big and then work small. So I'm just gonna kind of do some light washes of where I know I want these colors to go. So I know I kind of want to, and something else to know about the way that acrylic works is that you can use it in a way where it's a little bit more watercolor-like. It can be very transparent, but you can also, in a lot of ways, get a oil painting sort of look. And make it really opaque and layered. But I'm gonna start off transparent and then work towards something more opaque. Can mix this with water. So if you haven't worked with oil or acrylic, the thing about oil, pretty obviously it is an oil-based paint, which means that you cannot mix it with water. That would be bad. But acrylic is a water-based paint, so it's pretty simple, easy to use, I think easy cleanup. You don't need oil thinners and all those kinds of things. So putting on a thin layer like this can act as a background that can just make the other colors that go on top of it pop. So actually, if you wanted to, kind of a traditional method is to use an opposite color. So because most of my painting is going to be green, I could consider doing just a wash over this entire painting in red. And then when I put other colors on top of it, that will help it to pop, but it's not really what I'm going for today. I'm just gonna stick to the colors I'm using. Okay, so you can see I have my two greens. So something to keep in mind is, you know, with each color you're working with, there's a light version, or sorry, a cool version and a warm version of that color. So you can see here I have a cool version of green. It's a little bit more of a dark teal. And then I have a warm version of green where it's mixed with a warmer toned yellow. And I don't know if you noticed, but first I worked with a cooler yellow, more of a lemon yellow to mix with my dark green to make the color I wanted, and then I realized it wasn't quite what I wanted. I wanted something that was a little bit warmer. So this is a warm yellow ochre. So that's how I've gotten these two colors. Like I said, acrylic is a water-based paint, so it does dry pretty quickly. Even this part over here where it was pretty thin is already pretty dry. These other parts will take a minute, but I'll just keep doing my kind of general washes. So I know I'm gonna again stick to kind of the same colors, just mix them in different ways. So this is gonna be hopefully like a light neutral. See what it just looks like. The cup. So this is that lemon yellow, the raw sienna, and white. So we'll see. I want it to be a little bit. Yeah, that might work. Because I think my green will get darker. So her outfit will definitely pop. And I'm thinking about how do these colors work together and just what is the contrast. Thinking about how that works in a lot of different ways. And I'll definitely be coming back in and doing a lot of more details. Okay. Next I'm going to go to the skin, and I don't think I'm going to do straight out of the tube. I'm going to use some of the other colors that I have out. So I want this to be a little bit darker. So I'm going to use some of my blue. I'm really just taking such a tiny bit because this blue that I'm using is so overpowering. If you're using like a cobalt blue, that can also be strong, but really that like an indigo blue, Windsor blue, it's just really, really powerful. So that's something to be aware of when you're mixing colors, is figuring out what is the right consistency. Okay, and that is actually still too dark. So I'm watering it down, but I might want to warm it up as well. This might be a better color for the hair, whereas the skin should be pretty warm. So sometimes you just kind of have to play around, but that's why I really like to mix. Here, I'll move this out of the way. I really like to mix on my palette and make sure I get the color that I want. That's pretty close, but it's really still a little dark. I'm gonna put some water in there, kind of water it down a bit. I'm gonna make sure I can still see the details of my drawing that I want to keep. Sometimes I use my paper towel and I kind of dab out some if it's gotten too dark. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so I've gotten my washes down pretty well. So now I'll start going in with a lot of details. Yeah, I'm gonna give her hair a little bit more of a purple color. So I'm still working with brown, but I'm putting in red and purple with that as well. I'm probably not gonna add a ton to this hair. I'm not gonna make it ultra realistic. I generally tend to do something a little bit more stylized. So it's okay if there's some parts that are flat, especially this with her hair. Like, you know, it's cool, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is most often going to be the face. So you might be able to tell that I really like kind of putzing around with details, as it were. So I'm going to just kind of focus on one area for a second and bring it to what I would consider a finished place. And then I think really what this workshop is about is giving you an opportunity to just explore and kind of figure out how you would prefer to use acrylic as a medium, or if you like it or don't like it, which is totally fine. Okay, so this will be like this color that I see here that I've made. So I think I'll use some of my blue and lemon yellow. The white tends to make whatever you use with it opaque. It does make it lighter, but it also makes it less transparent. I suppose it depends on which white that you're using. Okay, so this should be a little bit thicker. This is definitely less transparent because I have more of the paint on my brush. So I'll just make a few of these leaves. Can go back in and do more detail later, which I will. So you could just spend some time kind of going through each place and thinking about where are the lights and where are the darks. And that's a really good way, I think, to kind of approach painting. And with acrylic, you don't have to worry so much about what you do first, because you can paint white over a darker color and it will be totally fine. It won't get muddy, which I think is kind of the nice thing about working with acrylic, which is why I prefer it to oil. But it's all kind of about, you find your thing. But I do think that working traditionally and just, understanding how it works can help you in a digital practice. Or you just might find that you like painting more than you thought. There's certainly, I think, certain qualities to working with paint that it's just really difficult to replicate digitally. Certainly people have, worked on mastering that, but there is something really nice about just getting that brush and paint in your hand. Okay. So because these are thicker, using a little bit more paint to get an opaque look, it might take a minute to dry, but it's still fairly thin. And I don't think I need it to be truly perfectly dry. So again, I kind of used a bigger brush to do my broad strokes. Now I'm going in with my tiny brush. And I like to do, like I said, stylistic work. So I'm going to use some unrealistic colors for details. This painting is just going to have a lot of layers of leaves and vegetation, which will be fun. Just getting lost in having a ton of details. So I'm certainly not going to finish this painting in this workshop for this demo. But maybe I will show you the finished piece later. Yeah, like this kind of, the lemon feels very neon-like compared to these darker teals, which is really fun. So to create texture in the leaves, I'm actually going in, again, a lot more paint on my brush, being a little bit more heavy-handed, and I'm just letting the paint and the colors mix together to create an interesting texture that kind of suggests leaves. And you know, I'm thinking about how nature is organized organically, but so I'll have some places that are a little bit lighter, especially here probably on the edges, and then go in with some darker spots to indicate shading, and then go back in. So I'll just probably build this up and go in some layers, and I'm not going to put details in every leaf, but I'll probably put details in a few. Just kind of do a little bit of outlining, because that's something I like. And I'll also put a lot of flowers in, but again, there's a lot of different ways that you can do this. You can really approach, you know, your paintbrush as almost like a pen and ink tool and do a lot of outlining. You can always go in a more traditional kind of approach as well, doing lots of layering and no outlining. So also keep in mind that you can always do dry brush. So if you want something that's very textured, you can not put any water in your brush and just kind of play around with interesting strokes. Just kind of finish. So you, as you can see, I'm putting this bright yellow over this dark green, and it's totally fine. I could be even more, I don't know, direct with that, or just put even more paint on my brush and really, I guess, do a more pure yellow if I was doing something more graphic or working with something more like geometric shapes. Could take a bright light color and put it right over a dark color, as long as that dark color is dry. Okay, well, that's about where I will end with this demo. So you can kind of see what I've been able to work on in about an hour and a half. Yours does not necessarily at all need to be this detailed or this finished for the workshop. For your assignment, of course, you want to make that complete, but for the workshop itself, this is a fine, maybe even too much for the workshop. The workshop should only take you about an hour. or less. It should just be an opportunity to kind of play around before jumping into the assignment. So all of the details will be in the online portal, Canvas or Blackboard, and you can go and see what prompt there is, and just kind of play around and have fun.